Well, we've got the good, the bad, and the ugly all compiled into this video. Hulk Hogan has just passed away. You also have updates about Saskatchewan and how they are kind of flirting with the 51st state idea and separation in conjunction with Alberta. You also have Mark Carney getting absolutely obliterated by a reporter and weaseling out of some questions in a very pathetic way. There's a lot to take a look at in this video, and I do hope you stick around for the full thing. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you guys to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. We got to talk about the best way that you can possibly get your news, because there's so much noise from the left and from the right. And that's a perfect segue into today's sponsor. We find this more and more common where the left says something and the right says something that's the complete opposite. So we always have to ask ourselves a question: where does the truth lie? Well, usually somewhere in the middle, which is why I've partnered with Ground News, because they have a way of cutting through all of the crap and getting right to the middle. Let's use this story as an example where Trump thinks Canadians nasty for avoiding U.S. travel, banning booze, says the ambassador. You can see here with the bias distribution bar that 74% of the sources are left leaning. And when you go and filter by the left, you can see that it's all about Canadians being proud to be considered nasty, defending it. It's just a very biased take. And when you go to the right, you can see a little bit more of an objective take as to why Trump made those comments. This is why it's actually important to take opinions from the left and opinions from the right so that you can see the truth lying right square in the middle. And it gets better, because my favorite feature of Ground News is actually called the blind spot feature. I use this feature a lot to structure my videos. It'll actually tell you for the left and for the right stories that you would have otherwise missed. That's why it's actually called the blind spot feature. Folks, I'm telling you, this is the best way to get your news, because it tells you objectively where the news actually is. And if you want the same plan that I do, which is a Vantage plan, if you click the link down below in the description, the pinned comment below, or scan the QR code on the screen, you'll get yourself 40% off. Thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. Without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting off with Hulk Hogan. Breaking: wrestling icon Hulk Hogan is dead at 71 years old. This is breaking headlines all around the world right now. WWE has even posted an official statement saying that we are saddened to learn that the WWE Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan has passed away. One of pop culture's most recognizable figures, Hogan helped WWE achieve global recognition in the 80s. WWE extends its condolences to Hogan's family, friends, and fans. And for those who didn't actually know, a little known fact is just a few short months ago, Hulk Hogan gave his life to Jesus Christ. Hogan was baptized in a total surrender and dedication to Jesus. There you go. You've got some photos of that. That is that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. He obviously was a big proponent in, endorsing President Trump during the election, played a big role in that. And so, of course, rest easy, brother. Then in other news, still to do with America, you have the Attorney General Pam Bondi suffers a medical emergency. She's supposed to give a speech, but it turns out that she can't. She says, "I'm sorry to miss all of my CPAC friends today. Unfortunately, I am recovering from a recent torn cornea, which is preventing me from being with you. I truly wish I was able to join you and support all the work being done on this critical issue," Bondi says in her statement. It's a bit of a coincidence, but nonetheless, let's move on to some other news, such as Hockey Canada verdict live updates. The judge is halfway through the decision and does not find the complainant's evidence credible or reliable. And it's looking like all of the hockey guys that are part of this are probably going to be able to walk free without any repercussions or consequences. And so that is going to be very controversial, but stay tuned for the final verdict on that. Then you have a Saskatchewan judge that has ruled that foreign nationals do not have the right to immigrate to Canada, which is a wild thing that somehow needs to be said. And well, people are finally breaking their silence. And then there's this very weird clip of Vashi Kapelos doing a CTV segment where she appears to be drunk. Let's have a look.
Great to see you. What was at stake for the Prime Minister and Premiers today at this summit?
Great to see you, too. Well, I think a lot is at stake for them and for Canadians writ large in the aggregate as we head toward this August the 1st deadline, if, in fact, Donald Trump continues to view it as a deadline to form trade deals with countries like ours. The certainty or lack thereof surrounding our economy and business investment climate is certainly at stake. And then I think also just sort of the nature of this crisis. Like, do we continue in this state where we are always at the whim of new tariffs from the United States, or perhaps is there an agreement that can be reached that doesn't cost some of our most important sectors thousands of jobs or their vibrancy, and ultimately does provide the certainty that a lot of Canadians are looking for? I feel like the stakes at this point could not be any higher, and very little was disclosed coming out of the meeting, which I found very interesting, right? Tons of questions for the premiers and for the Prime Minister. Did they talk about, for example, what level of tariffs they view as bearable, if in fact the Prime Minister is correct and some level is inevitable? Did they talk about what retaliation looks like if there isn't a deal by August the 1st? Nobody would really say. They kind of kept pivoting away, saying we're unified, and not much more than that.
Yeah, so with so much, not secrecy, I guess I should say, but, you know, playing their cards tight to their vest, Carney spoke about the right deal for Canada. Is that possible ahead of Trump's August 1st deadline, which, as you said, not being very tight-lipped about that deadline as it appears? Maybe it is also a moving target like we've heard before.
Yeah, I think your question is a really good one, like about the right deal. I wish I could define for you what exactly the federal government views as the right deal. Like you said, they are playing their cards close to their chest, and we'll see to what degree that strategy is successful or not for them by August the 1st. But ultimately, if in fact we are going to agree to some level of tariffs, which to be fair to the federal government, other countries have, what is that level? How punitive is it to certain industries? What will the government do to compensate or to sort of insulate those industries? At what cost will that come to other sectors?
What is wrong with her face? Yeah, and we've all been there at one point or another where you've had a couple drinks and now you gotta act cool, and so you like you're talking a little bit. You think that you're speaking normal, that you're blending in, but your eyes and your face and your speech are just a little bit different. And I can see it. I can see it. I can see why people would be thinking this about Vashi.
Or other parts of the country. Like, all of these are very important questions that need answers before we can really assess what the quote unquote right deal looks like. And ultimately, at this point, it is very opaque for Canadians. Like, what are the negotiators advocating for? Because a few weeks ago, it was no tariffs. Then last week, it became some level of tariffs. This week, we do not know what that level is, what could be bearable, what their negotiating stance is. Like I said, understandably, less transparency because they're in the middle of those negotiations. But ultimately, by August the 1st, we're going to need to know so Canadians can judge for themselves.
Honestly, Canada should just consider becoming the 51st state. I don't know. Am I allowed to say that? Am I a closeted 51st stater? I don't even know anymore. I mean, there's so many benefits to being more integrated with America. We wouldn't have tariffs. We'd have cheaper costs of living. We'd have more of a military presence. We'd have more competition for everything. Potato chips even. You ever been to America and go to a grocery store and go to the chip aisle? There's an entire aisle dedicated just to chips, both sides of the aisle. It's insane. They got like barbecue, southern barbecue, northern barbecue, eastern barbecue, western barbecue, hot barbecue, mild barbecue, real American barbecue. I mean, that's just the barbecue flavors. They don't have ketchup. I'll give them that. They are missing ketchup. Maybe all dressed too. I don't know. I think they got all dressed, but there's so much variety and competition in America, which is good. It's good. It drives innovation. Anyways, let's move off of that and let's take a look here at Mark Carney, who embarrasses himself completely by a reporter. Let's laugh at him together, huh?
There are concerns from Inuit leaders that C5 does not respect their modern treaties, which specifically outline the need for development and environmental assessments. Will you still proceed with upfront approvals?
I will, to be absolutely clear, C5 fully respects modern treaty, all treaty rights, modern treaty rights, and environmental assessment consistent with those treaty rights. It's one of the things we'll discuss directly. What at its heart C5 does is it makes the federal participation in any project more efficient and more effective. One of the issues that has been the case here across Inuit Nunavut and Northwest Territories across Canada is that the federal government has been a less effective partner. What C5 helps us do is be a more effective partner. One of the aspects of that, to the second part of your question, is coordinating much better with the environmental assessments that are done, if I might say, with provinces as an example, but under and consistent with modern treaties.
Oh, I don't know. It just seems like maybe he is not capable of getting the job done and needs to trample over people's rights, which is just very in line with liberal ideologies. And that's the only way that he can really get stuff done. But he also had Mark Carney weasel his way out of this question here when asked about Gaza.
The Child First program.
We'll do one last question.
Okay, just on Gaza.
Is anyone else?
Yep. Kevin Woodley, Carly. The IRC is investing in LNG.
He doesn't want to answer anything to do with it. Oh my freaking goodness. Mark Carney, what a leader. Selects, he gets to pick what questions are asked of him. That's true leadership material in Canada. Good job, Liberals. Elbows up, elbows up. And then in other Canadian news, you had a police chase by kayak in PEI. I'm not making this up. Let's take a look.
Mitchell Lanigan was arrested here on the Glover Shore Road just over an hour after Summerside police issued an alert to say the man was armed, dangerous, and moving through the city on foot. Lanigan was first spotted in the city in the early hours of the morning, having come from Tyne Valley, where RCMP say there was also an overnight incident there. Lanigan first came on police's radar this weekend when they say he got in a fight with two other men in Mimminagash and shot off a gun. He's already been charged for that. Earlier in the week, police had said they did not believe Lanigan was a threat to public safety, so they didn't issue an emergency alert.
I think there's a clear distinction between when an alert should and should not be used. One of the key factors that we look at is this individual in a particular location that we know of, and can we help to inform islanders on how to protect themselves? And in our particular situation, Mr. Lanigan had left the scene.
And then Lanigan popped up again, this time when police say he shot a dog in Tyne Valley.
Prince District RCMP were called to a residence in Tyne Valley in response to an incident involving Mr. Lanigan, as well as a dog that had been shot and killed at that residence. Mr. Lanigan left the scene, and RCMP continued the search for Mr. Lanigan, and he was later located in Summerside, which led to further events there.
So the officer noted the vehicle coming into the city early this morning around 5 o'clock was being driven at a very high rate of speed. The officer didn't pursue at the time for public safety reasons.
Police then found the car abandoned and started a ground search for Lanigan. The chief says they were able to narrow him to a specific area here on Water Street East between Reed's Corner and McEwen Road. So that's when the police issued the emergency alert.
Given that the firearms had been discharged, again, as recently as overnight, he was involved in another incident.
That's good. I mean, police doing their job, right? But the whole point of this story was the fact that the police basically chased the guy by kayak. Now, they're not going to show it, but that was literally, I mean, the main point of the story. You can see here the title on CBC: PEI, police chase suspect by kayak after alleged dog shooting triggers emergency alert. Very wild, very wild. Only in Canada do you see stuff like that actually happen. And now we got to talk about, since we are talking about Canada, we got to talk about Saskatchewan and their big decision to leave Canada with Alberta and potentially with British Columbia. or so it seems. Let's take a look now at the latest and greatest of this, of Saskatchewan playing the long game.
Canada's premiers have wrapped up 3 days of meetings that was mainly focused on the ongoing trade dispute with the United States. The deadline for those talks is now just a little over a week away. But Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew said today the date of a deal isn't what is most important.
It's really important for Canada to get a good deal rather than rushing to take any deal, including one that might harm us in the long term. I think our kids and grandkids are going to look back at this time as an inflection point where we had the opportunity to stand up for our nation's independence.
Scott Moe is the Premier of Saskatchewan. Premier, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
What's your level of comfort that we'll have some clarity or resolution with the United States by August? It seems like we've accepted it's not going to happen, and it's just going to be a persistent state of affairs.
Yeah, we need to really keep the long game and what our goal is when it comes to our discussions with the United States, because things are changing at times on a daily or hourly basis, and it's important for us to understand that we do have a trade deal that is in place today, and we're negotiating, what a renewal of that or a revamp of that might look like in what is, very quick changing, quick moving, and challenging environment.
We've seen just since the premiers have been here in Huntsville that Japan has ended up, look, we don't know the fine print of any of this, right? So the devil is in the details, but it looks like a 15% tariff for Japan. There's reports in the Financial Times that the European Union is going to agree to a 15% tariff. Are you worried the baseline with America is just going to be 15%, which is a heck of a lot higher where we've been?
Well, I think my hope would be zero, but we have to be less than everyone else, just in the interest of economic security, not just for the U.S. and Canada, but for our continent. And if we truly are concerned as North Americans of our, the economic, the fuel, the food security, the manufacturing security, the economic security that we have, ultimately, and utilizing that to invest in our general security, we're going to have to be less than that. So preferably zero, and I think zero should still be the target. That's what we have now with the USMCA agreement, but we'll leave those negotiations to the federal government in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, but less than 15% could still be pretty bad, right? I mean, this is it feels like the situation we're in. I mean, what is there a number that is simply an unacceptable level? Like, is it 10? Is it 8? Like, because certain industries like auto probably can't survive numbers like that.
No, and that's why we need to be negotiating from a space where we push it down as low as possible, simply because of the integration that we have across the border. And listen, I've long been a voice saying that when President Trump puts a tariff on Canadian products that are heading to the U.S., that has a financial impact negatively on American families and American industries. It pushes costs up for Americans. And so, the closer we are to zero, the better for America, the better for Canada, and I would say the better for North America.
Daniel Smith said at the closing press conference today that if there's a deal on the sectoral tariffs by August 1, she'd consider that a win, and then you move on and negotiate on CUSMA, probably starting in 2026. Do you think we should hope for anything on sectoral tariffs by August 1? It seems like that win may not be there.
I think I'd be less bullish on the date and more concerned about the content of the agreement. As I said, we have an operational agreement now. However, there are some challenges in certain sectors around that, impacting Saskatchewan as well, I might add. But we do need a strong agreement moving forward if we are to achieve what our goals are out into the future.
Right. It seems, though, quite possible there could be nothing on August 1. That is just whatever the president puts on social media, and then Canada has to scramble to adapt to it. I mean, how do you think the country needs to approach it in a circumstance like that?
Well, I think they're approaching it in the right way. I think Dominic LeBlanc was here, met with us yesterday, and then was off to Washington, D.C. And he certainly, I think, is the voice for our government to have in D.C. alongside the Prime Minister. And so, whether it be the U.S. or other markets around the world that are of importance to Saskatchewan and Canada, like China, the Prime Minister is engaging and really prioritizing the credibility that Canada has on the global stage with global leaders, including President Trump. And so, credit to him for that, and we need to keep it up.
President Trump has really injected an urgency and a focus, I would argue, into the political agenda and the economic focus of the Canadian leadership class. But he also seems to have just sucked all of the partisanship out of it. You and I have been at a lot of these conferences conferences together, this is very different, Premier. Like, there is no factions, there is no disagreement, there's none of the proxy war stuff we saw in the past. I mean, is that just a feature of the moment, or do you think this is something that can persist?
Both. I think when you look at the Council of Federation, and this is probably my 7th or 8th meeting, the Council of Federation has often been able to work through partisan differences that we might have. I think of, former Premier Horgan or Andrew Furey around the table, not of the political stripe I might be, but we found points of consensus. And so the Council of Federation table certainly has been able to achieve that. What we see and what I see, I speak for myself with Prime Minister Carney, is an individual that is, very much engaging with the provinces on where we might land as Canadians, and is bringing, I think a wealth of common sense to the conversation. And he has some priorities, and you're starting to see those play out. Trade is a priority, increasing the effort that he is making and his government is making for Canadian credibility in the global atmosphere, the global environment, and I credit him for that. That's something we've always been focused on at the provincial level, and I think that's all we've been asking for is that very mature conversation and collaboration with the premiers on how can we do best by Canadians that we collectively represent them all.
But just as a final point, Premier, if you look ahead with this uncertainty, there's going to be some rough times, quite probably economically. Like, a lot of jobs have already been lost. A lot more are pretty close to slipping under, and there is going to.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Carney's slashing all the public sector jobs. I think it was just announced that he's doing 28,000 public sector job cuts in the next several years, with several more to come. I mean, don't get it mistaken. Alberta and Saskatchewan's priority is securing the bag for their own provinces. The Canada First movement is, it's just a brochure, right? It's just a pamphlet. Never in the history has every single province been able to work together for any amount of time, let alone an extended period of time. And the whole Canada First movement is all hinging on Trump basically trying to screw over Canada. At least that's their interpretation of it. So what happens if that goes away? Then what? Then is every single province and territory still going to want to work together? No, they're going to start to claw at themselves, except Saskatchewan and except Alberta. They're going to be working together. Hopefully BC can catch up too, because polling data shows that there is a tremendous amount of support to leave in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and growing in British Columbia.
Be a political impulse at different levels, federally, wherever, to blame them and to start trying to capitalize on these struggles rather than solve them. If and when that kind of a dynamic unfolds, do you think this can last? I mean, what role do premiers then play in trying to hold it all together?
That will definitely happen as we have global trade challenges, tariff discussions, counter-tariff discussions. If we don't change how we do business in Canada, here's the trump card, if I could use that, that Canadians have, is if we drastically change the regulatory environment so that we can attract investment, create jobs, have the construction and expansion of our industries, that's the opportunity. And so the challenges are easily identified by yourself and by many others. There is an opportunity in here, unlike I have seen in over a decade, for Canada and Canadians to really capitalize on, but it is going to require some of the change internally in what we do as a nation, what we do as provinces. And I'm cautiously optimistic that I see Prime Minister Carney and his government, looking very seriously at making those changes, changing the regulatory environment to have the investment dollars come into Canada. That is my hope, is that we as Canadians have the opportunity over the next number of months and years to truly capitalize on some of the uncertainty that we're seeing globally, is for Canada to come in and be a beacon of certainty in that environment.
So the test isn't necessarily what happens with Trump, as important as that is. It's whether you deliver on what you're promising internally, the things you can't control.
Both are important. Yeah. Both are important. You hear premiers coming out of Western Premiers meeting and the First Ministers meeting in Saskatoon talking about, a port-to-port corridor, opening up Asian and European markets. That's aside and in addition to whatever we can achieve with the United States of America. And so there is opportunities in all of this, but we have to change the way we do things and make it more real and more possible.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, always appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, the whole kind of getting behind the collective, getting behind the Trump, like, oh, we got to stand up to Trump thing, that eventually fizzles out. Because it's only in a time of panic that resentment was created, that narrative was created. That was never created before. It was all done as a panic during the election and post-election, and eventually it will fizzle out. Now, being cautiously optimistic about regulations being dropped, red tape being cut, permits being, expedited and fast-tracked, yeah, I would stand there. I mean, these are all promises that sound phenomenal. Trudeau was also great at delivering these, great ideas, this hopium. But as we saw with 10 years of Liberals, nothing ever happened. But you know what will always exist is the sentiment that Alberta and Saskatchewan and, British Columbia is starting to pick up, that we need to start to do what's best for us, because at the federal level, it's just so freaking mismanaged that if the provinces have an opportunity to have some sort of allegiance and to leave, especially Alberta and Saskatchewan, you bet your ass they're going to be taking it. That's why the referendum process is continuing for Saskatchewan and for Alberta. But we're going to have to wait and see how that does play out. This is the end of the video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you did, slap a like on it, support the channel sponsor, and I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.